If there is one part of Oswald's story that truly reveals who he was, it is time in New Orleans. This is where the story stops making sense, where the lines start to blur, where loyalty, ideology and manipulation all begin to mix. They said he was a nobody. They lied. He wasn't just watching the game, he was in it. And without even knowing it, he was also being played. When you think of someone working for CIA, you picture dark suits, a gun, a badge, maybe even some secret breathing. But the truth is, it's not always like that. Sometimes the connection is softer, indirect. CIA uses assets, people who aren't officially from the agency, but who still do favors or pass along information. And in return, they get paid or get favors back. And somehow, Lee Harvey Oswald is about to meet a bunch of them. June 13, 1962, Oswald arrived in New Jersey with his family. Waiting to greet them was a man named Spas Rankin, officially a representative of the Travel's Aid Society, who also just happened to hold a position with the Anti-Bolshevik Nations, a fiercely anti-communist group with direct connections to CIA. He helped the Oswald clear customs and immigration, then sent them on the way to Fort Worth, Texas. There, Oswald meets a man named George de Mohrenschildt, a wealthy, well-connected man who was fluent in Russian. Years later, de Mohrenschildt told a journalist named Edward Epstein something very interesting, that a CIA operative named J. Walton Moore gave him Oswald's address and told him that meeting Oswald will be useful for the agency. The two quickly became friends, and many researchers believe that de Mohrenschildt was Oswald's handler for CIA. De Mohrenschildt then introduces the Oswalds to a friend of his, a woman who conveniently wants to learn Russian. Her name, Ruth Paine. The official story about Ruth Paine is that she was just a nice neighbor who wanted to learn Russian and help Marina. But when you look closer, the stories start to feel very different. Her sister, Sylvia Heidhoek, was a CIA operative, even though it was hidden and denied for decades. Her father worked for the United States Agency for International Development, an agency that was used as a front for CIA work around the world during the Cold War. And even more interesting, Ruth Paine's best friend, Mary Bancroft, happened to be the mistress of CIA Director Allen Dulles. And guess who found the perfect job for Oswald at the Texas School Book Depository just a few weeks before JFK arrived in Dallas? Ruth Paine. So you can see why in 1967, when New Orleans District Attorney Jim Garrison started his own investigation, he felt that something about Ruth Paine was very wrong. Something just didn't add up. So he asked to see her tax returns. The answer he got, it's classified, on the ground of national security. Let me be clear, normal citizen tax returns are not classified, and certainly not for national security reasons. That's not just strange, that's a huge red flag, and Garrison knew it. When you connect this dot, it doesn't feel like Ruth Paine was just a nice neighbor who wanted to learn Russian. No, it feels like she was part of something much bigger, a web that reached deep into the world of espionage. In April 1963, Oswald returns to New Orleans, the place where he grew up. He gets a job at the Raleigh Coffee Company. At first, it looks like a normal job, a guy working to support his family. But here's the thing, William Raleigh, the owner, wasn't just running a coffee business. The classified documents reveal he had a relationship with CIA for years. He was founding anti-Castro groups at the exact same time CIA was running secret operation to take Castro down in New Orleans. And the Raleigh Coffee Company, well, just happened to be right next door to the local offices of the FBI, Secret Service, and CIA. Then comes the Fair Play for Cuba Committee, a group meant to build support for Cuba in the US. They had chapters across the country with hundreds of members. But to CIA, these people weren't just activists, they were Castro spies. And this was exactly the kind of thing James Jesus Angleton, the head of CIA counterintelligence, wanted to know about. James Angleton was a legend inside CIA. He was known as the poet spy. He was very smart and completely obsessed with the idea that the Soviets were everywhere. To him, Cuba wasn't just a neighbor. It was part of the same Soviet threats. And here's where things get very interesting, because The classified document revealed that in 1963, CIA took formal interest in the Fair Play for Cuba Committee. They didn't just study them from afar. They sent undercover agents to infiltrate, observe, and report on its member. And that's exactly when Lee Harvey Oswald moved back to New Orleans and started promoting that very same group. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe this was the moment Oswald was sent quietly, set in motion for something he'd never see coming until it was too late. One of the first things Oswald does is set up a local chapter of the Fair Play for Cuba Committee. But here's the weird part. Guess how many members he has? 5, 10? How about 0? He's the only member. Oswald work with the committee in New Orleans was very strange to say the least. He didn't have or spend time with other people who supported Castro. Nobody. And guess where he's running his so-called operation? In a small office inside a building where some of the most hardcore anti-Castro people in the country also work. How is he allowed to run his operation there? That makes zero sense. You had people like David Ferrie, former FBI agent Guy Bannister, who worked for New Orleans mafia boss Carlos Marcello. Marcello hated Castro, but he hated the Kennedys even more. Oswald writes a letter to the Fair Play for Cuba Committee headquarters, telling them that he's been handing out leaflets in New Orleans. He's running out of them. He asks for more. They send him a fresh batch, and he has made contact. You could say, well, that proved he was a communist, and maybe you would be right. But here's the thing. At the very same time, Oswald is doing something that completely goes against that idea. He meets with a man named Carlos Berenguer, the head of an anti-Castro group called the Cuban Student Directorate. Oswald tells Berenguer that he's a former Marine who hates communism and is ready to help train Cuban exile. Years later, documents will reveal that the Cuban Student Directorate wasn't just some activist group. It was organized and funded by CIA. Things keep getting weirder. After meeting with Berenguer, Oswald heads to an anti-Castro area in New Orleans to hand out leaflets. And here's the strange part. Someone films him doing it. This is 1963. You can't just pull out your phone and start recording someone. So who paid for this to be filmed? It sure wasn't Oswald. He didn't have the money for that. There is a term in the military and intelligence world called sheep-dipped. It's the process of hiding someone's true affiliation, making them look like they have no connection to any government or agency. In other words, it's how you send someone undercover while keeping enough distance to be able to deny them if things go bad. And right here, that's exactly what seems to be happening to Oswald. Out in the open, in front of everyone, looking like a radical Castro supporter. To pull off a sheep dip, you need a scene, something public, impossible to ignore. While Oswald is handing out pro-Castro leaflet, 4 members of the Cuban Student Directorate confront him. They grab his leaflet, toss them in the air and start shouting. It almost turned into a fight, until 2 police officers arrived and arrest everyone. They are brought to the police station, and the first thing Oswald does, he asks to speak to an FBI agent. Now, why would someone who supports Castro want to see an FBI agent? That's the last person you want to see in 1963, if you were truly working for Castro. The incident makes the news. The narrative starts to take shape. Soon after his arrest, Oswald is on local TV, explaining his politics, saying he's a Marxist, not a communist. But it's too late.
You're a Marxist?
Well, I have studied Marxist philosophy, yes, sir, and also other philosophers.
But are you a Marxist? I think you did admit on an earlier radio interview that you consider yourself a Marxist.
Oh, I would very definitely say that I am a Marxist. That is correct. But that does not mean, however, that I'm a communist.
Lee Harvey Oswald has been sheep-dipped.